So, Karyn, can you tell us about your role as a medical officer in sales?
Sure. Thanks for having me, Rochelle. Yeah, I'm a doctor, but it is actually a medical team. So the medical response is composed of a number of people. And my role, it depends on which track, which position we're doing. I've done everything from chase car medical officer to trackside medical officer to, vehicles and race control. So at the end of the day, we are responsible for any medical event, anything to do with medical. And it may also be that somebody is sick or not just an on-track incident. We are on duty for the competitors, the crews, officials, and contractors. So we're not responsible for the general public. The only time that we might be drawn into that is if there is a mass casualty event or perhaps a serious medical event, and if we can spare the resources, then we will. We help liaise with emergency services, in particular ambulance, but also fire and rescue and police at times. And so it just depends on what happens and what's going on. So if it's an on-track incident, the first decision is, do we need other resources? Do we need to transfer this person to a definitive care for medical reasons? And that really determines what the response will be.
How many is generally that would make up the medical team?
Very much event dependent. Okay. So it may be as few as, half a dozen if it's a small club event. Might be as few as 2 plus an ambulance if you're really unlucky. Through to Formula One will be the biggest medical team that we have, and in years gone past we would have probably 100 odd people, because we would have track posts. We'd have 16 odd track posts manned by 2 or 3 personnel at each one, plus the medical incident intervention vehicles, plus chase car, plus race control, plus medical centre. Now it's probably more in the vicinity of about 50 to 80. Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a big team. So how many, so what kind of skills obviously would a person need? Do they need to be, in that field professionally to be part of the medical team?
Yeah, so generally you do need to have the appropriate professional qualifications. It's the only officialing where you are working in an actual vocational official capacity, professional capacity. So you need appropriate qualifications, registrations, and insurances.
Okay.
So if you're a volunteer, that does make it a little hard. Sometimes, if we're really lucky, sometimes we do get paid or, paid a token amount, so that can help. But we also have other roles. So we have Victor drivers. So the MIVs are driven by somebody, and they're usually competitive drivers, but they may come from other areas. We have liaison people and support people who will clerk, patients coming in, help to manage the medical centre. So they're not necessarily medically qualified. And we have doctors, paramedics and nurses.
Wow. So how did you become involved as a medical officer in motorsport?
So it was a very long time ago in the dim dark past when I was a GP, and I actually met another GP who was a racer at a pharmaceutical dinner, and we got talking, and he said, you must come out to Lakeside sometime, and he took my name and number, and a couple of months later he rang me up and said, come on out, here's a ticket. He had a race team. It was the Quit racing team, so it was sponsored by Quit Smoking. And I went out to Lakeside and went, this is really interesting, having never been, overly involved in, never been involved in motorsport before. And because you have to have a medical officer in the chase car, that was my introduction to being an official. So chasing the first lap of a race, which is really the best part of it, what we get to do. So, so I was hooked from there. I joined the team. I was a competitor for a year back in 95. But I've been involved mostly as an official.
Okay. So before that, were you an enthusiast? Would have you said you were a motorsport enthusiast before meeting him and having that conversation?
I would have said I'm a car enthusiast. We were always a car family.
Okay.
My brother was interested in F1, so we, occasionally I'd sort of see it on the TV late at night, but we were never really following motorsport. So it's really been my thing, and so it's been a great part of my life and professional life over the last, more than a quarter of a decade.
Fantastic. Obviously hooked now. We've got you.
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. Has anyone got any questions for Karyn? No? I always say it's it's one of the best places to have an incident is at the track, because generally you've got medical assistance there within, a minute.
I did have a question, actually.
Oh.
I just wasn't fast enough to unmute myself. Just in terms of how, one thing I know often does happen, but how do you in the medical centre deal with friends and family if someone's injured? Because I know, and just even, I guess, general fans and other people wanting to see what's happening.
Yeah, that's been one of my things, because I have been interrupted by broadcast commentators before in the middle of trying to examine somebody. So it's highly inappropriate for somebody else to be in the room if you're doing a medical examination. So this is why we do need those support staff to try and help liaise and put them to the side. The chaplains are really good as well. The motorsport chaplains are very good to help deal with the worried. And, if we can just give them a look, we're okay, but we just need to go through all the processes, then that would generally settle them down. But it is a bit of an issue, and this is why we need the appropriate facilities wherever we are. So, for example, rally is completely different to circuit. So at circuit, we really would like to have a proper room with some privacy and, minimal standards. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, it's Kel, the static Kel. How are you, Karyn?
Thanks,
I was about to ask you about rally and how different it is. So how do you operate out in the field? That's, what do you have to do to adapt to be an MIV there?
So rally, we only have MIVs who are on the stages at various parts, we're designated. There's a minimum, so there's a maximum distance in between. So it depends on the length of the stage. And we also have ICVs, intervention vehicles, who are run by the, for example, the deputy chief medical officer will be in one of those, and more experienced people. But in each MIV, we are quite self-sufficient. So we have a driver, and we have a fire and rescue. So we carry rescue equipment with us. So our vehicles are really heavy because there's a huge amount of equipment in them. And so rally is one of my favourites for training. We always have training days before the really big events. And so that's my one chance in the year to get together with some cutting gear and, cut some metal or prise apart a door or something. But yeah, so we're very mobile. We're completely self-sufficient. And so we may be at a start, we may be mid-stage, and we will also do medical sweeps after the fast sweep goes through. But it's quite different, and we all, depending on the event, then we may have a helicopter backup as well. So, everything is sort of coordinated through through rally command to figure out what resources are needed for different incidents.
Excellent, thank you.
I guess I'll just put my hand up and say I've been very privileged to have been on the WAMS committee with Rochelle and Kel, and I'm currently on the Australian Women in Motorsport Commission of Motorsport Australia. And so as an official, one of my great privileges has been to help coordinate the officials exchange program. And we're very hopeful that this will continue in the future, COVID permitting. So, so that's one of the big things that that we see as a great program to help encourage ladies to become officials and to progress through officialing.
Oh, fantastic. That's great.
I have a question. The COVID thing came up. How do you think, and I know this is crystal ball gazing, how do you think this whole COVID thing is going to change our motorsport in the future? in the not too distant future, hopefully?
Sure. It's well, it's already changed, hasn't it? So I'm also on the National Medical Advisory Committee, and we did have a lot of email conversations about the COVID thing as Motorsport Australia was writing the return to race policy. And there was great discussion about competitors sitting side by side, people sitting together in vehicles for prolonged periods of time. I do think this is going to go on for quite a long time. I don't think that we're going to go back to normal anytime soon, and it will really rely on having an efficient and safe vaccine, which could take, you know, years, maybe a year or two. So I think it's going to affect all areas. We need to, you know, everyone basically needs to become an infection control expert. So it's about social distancing, good hygiene practices, figuring out capacities of rooms where people are sitting, if you need to wear a mask, you know, all of these sorts of things. And it really will change the way that we deliver certain things. For example, as was spoken about before, the drivers' briefings and people in emergency vehicles, you know, where you may have 3 or 4 people in a vehicle together all day. Well, now we should probably have the windows down, or, you know, stand just outside the car and not sit together for too long, or try and put family groups together, or, you know, whatever that is. But it is going to affect a lot of things. And the bubble idea, I think, is a great one with the teams and the crews. Maybe that will be the same for the flag points, etc. And then it's going to be difficult for the fans, because I think it's going to be limiting to the fan numbers for quite some time, and the experiences that they might have.
Thank you.
No worries.
Fantastic. So if somebody is interested in becoming a medical officer that is in the medical profession, what's some tips for them to get started in the role?
The tips are, you need to be sensible and have common sense, as has been mentioned before, and be able to work in a team environment. So it very much depends on where you are, what events you want to become involved in. Clearly there's a lot more club events that happen, and that's a really great place to start with the grassroots. And that depends on who the promoter is, who, you know, is it a track preferred supplier, or is it one of the bigger events where there may be a professional organisation that runs those, such as TMA or EMT or MSR. So it's a matter of putting a hand up and just getting yourself known. And mostly you will be snapped up, because like everybody with volunteers, you know, it's getting harder and harder to attract and retain volunteers.
Thank you.